everybody who's spoken. They're so eloquent, I'm not going to add much more, except to say that this is clearly a national grassroots movement. It is remarkable to watch. And right now we have bills that are pending in Washington, D.C., in Pennsylvania, in New York. Wisconsin will be introduced this coming week. Minnesota is pending. I understand Maryland may be reintroduced. This is a movement, and it can't be stopped. And that's what's so fascinating about it, because as hard as this has been, those of us who've been through the ringer in Colorado and Ohio, it has been well worth it, and it is wonderful to see New York taking up the issue as hard as it can be. Before we open for questions, I just wanted to recognize that everybody in this room, in some way or another, I think has something to do with the movement. But I wanted to recognize Barbara Blaine. Please stand up. Pioneer in this field. We have Ann Barrett Doyle of bishopaccountability.org. We can't live without. It is just a remarkable database. John Salveson and Tammy Lerner are here from Philadelphia. They're with the Foundation and from the Philadelphia DA's office, which has been by far the best DA's office in the country. We have Charlie Gallagher and Mariana Sorensen. I also want to recognize from Yeshiva University, Rabbi Blau. A passionate advocate for the survivors. And none of this really might have gotten rolling if it weren't for some of the lawyers who were willing to represent survivors when it wasn't really a popular thing to do. And we're lucky today to have Steve Rubino and Mike Dowd with us, who are part of questions, comments from the audience? Yes.
Yes.
Victoria.
Yes. My name is Victoria Balfour. I live here in New York City. I'm a journalist, and I was abused by a family member at age 7. But I'm here to talk about a case in California that began as a criminal case, went to civil, and became a criminal again. Just a brief history. A friend of mine was living in New York City in 2002 confided to me that he was molested by a child psychiatrist in 1976. He was 12 years old. He was very fragile, and he asked him to kind of look and see if the guy was still alive. He couldn't. I did some research. The child psychiatrist, whose name is Dr. William Ayers, was still alive, had been a president of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. So I went to the San Mateo, California Police Department, where they told me that 2 other victims had come forward in the 80s and nothing had just been unfounded. So what happened was it became a criminal case. It was very promising. In June 2003, just before the police were going to do a sting on Dr. Ayers, Supreme Court decision, Stogner versus California, came down, which I'm not quite clear, I'm not a lawyer, but anyway, that my friend was out of statute for criminal case, and the detective tried to talk my friend out of filing a civil case. He said, oh, the doctor has deep pockets. So luckily my friend and his very adamant mother decided to file a civil suit, which they filed December 2003. You know, the doctor stalled, they had a lot of money. It finally was going to trial July 2005, and I managed to convince some papers to do stories when it would settle. I was to be a witness. Lo and behold, victims saw the stories, including victims who come forward in the 80s, whose cases had been deemed unfounded. I posted this story. I found more victims, but they weren't within statute. I had about 15 victims, and one of them I found had died of suspected suicide in October 2005. And at that point, I went back to the police, said, I know 15 victims over the course of 20 years, and I convinced them to open a criminal investigation, and It's because of the civil suit, because of the publicity, we had enough victims.
And the civil suit was filed as a response of the window.
Yes,
in
exactly.
California.
Yeah, I want to make that clear. He got in with because these other victims were out of luck, actually.
Now, one of the problems in California with the window was that it was so novel that many of the survivors did not have the capacity to get in through that 1 year. It's not quite as novel now, and so there's better publicity about it. But one of the cults in California, the Children of God, which is a really awful sex cult, none of them got in through the window because they just didn't realize it was in existence until after it was closed. And so one of the issues out there is that is publicity and getting survivors to know that it's out there and that it's available when it is. Other comments or questions?
I just wanted to say Dr. Ayers was arrested because the police got a search warrant and they started calling patients and they found 9, 10, 11-year-old boys molested. So now there are 40 victims and he's going on trial in March.
Good.
I'm attorney Mitchell Garaviti, and I represented about 350 victims in Boston. And we're trying to pass legislation in Boston similar to what you're trying to do here in New York. And I was wondering what the opposition is with regard to the American Civil Liberties Union. They're giving us
the ACLU has now come out against the window because it harms defendants, because it makes them harder to prove their cases. I have been trying to get the ACLU to be on the side of children on a variety of issues, so medical neglect and other issues, for at least 15 years, and they never have taken the side of children unless it's speech.
It's been my experience in Boston that at the actual hearings, they'll show up and speak for 10, 15, 20 minutes in opposition to the legislation.
No, they have decided to take an opposing view.
And those legislators who want to oppose the bill seem to rely on what the ACLU is saying. And it's very
Well, I mean,
difficult.
the opponents are pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Right? The insurance industry, the teachers, the defense attorneys, the ACLU through the defense attorneys. These are powerful individuals, but sometimes they can be overcome.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm just wondering what the issue was.
Yeah. Civil rights, per se. Yes, John.
I have a question for Senator Peterson. You mentioned the insurance industry was an opponent. Can you talk to us about your strategy for dealing with their objections to this legislation?
Yes, they came to me and to Representative Hudson. She was my prime co-sponsor in the House. They came early on, and they said, look, we're really concerned because, if a case is 20,